What's up out there? This is an update for the Exsanguinate Juggernaut video I put out the other day. I've got this up to level 91. You guys had a lot of great suggestions, and I've implemented a ton of changes onto this build. So I'm going to go over the passive tree here in a second and a little bit of the gear. This is a supplement to the other video. I'll try to remember to link that video in the little card thing up here. We're going to go run a map really quick here. And the first thing I would like to point out is I finally remembered to put Righteous Fire on here. Now, Righteous Fire is a weird one because I've always viewed Righteous Fire as a primary skill. And the very first league that the full league that I actually played in, league started Righteous Fire. So I always attribute it as a primary skill and not necessarily as a secondary skill or a supplemental skill. And I forget about this. Now, I actually league started an Exsanguinate Scion this league, and I'm pretty sure I did put Righteous Fire on it at some point because, and I always thought it was weird people were running Righteous Fire on their builds as like an alt skill or a supplement or whatever, but up until recently, I did not understand that this thing grants more spell damage on the Righteous Fire gem. So yeah, you're going to do a little bit of Righteous Fire damage, but this thing takes you, was it 28 something or something like that? I can't remember, up to almost 50, from 33,000 to 49,950 physical damage. So this goes up a lot. This adds a lot of spell damage. I think this, now, if I remember correctly, well, no, maybe that doesn't apply. I don't know if that's always been this way or not. So like, I know there was some ways that Righteous Fire didn't scale off of spell damage or something like that. There was some nuance to it. I can't remember exactly what was all about that. I know that changed when we got Transfigured gems. That became something different. And I got to go deal with these guys real quick here. I wish, somebody brought up a good point. It'd be nice to be able to block these four. So, because I really don't want to deal with this right now. It'd just be nice to be able to block them and not see them. So hopefully we get the masters, the four big NPCs or whatever. Be nice to be able to actually block them. So I know this map is nothing special. This is just a tier 14. It's not something exciting. Tier 16, Valdo, whatever, tier 17. But for this build, for the way this build is running and is how it works, I'm pretty pleased with this. This is a build that I came up with on my own. I did not follow a POB. I started from scratch, blank sheet, and just started building. And I'm very happy with the way this turned out. It's been a lot better than I thought it would. You could actually league start this one. I don't think I would necessarily, but you could. It's certainly a possibility. I don't think this is a bad one. The problem you'll run into is that it doesn't scale up necessarily. You're not going to be taking down Ubers with this thing. And from what I understand, there's like an Exsanguinate mine build or something that's probably a lot better than this is. But this is a physical-based skill gem, and I wanted to see what it could do with a Juggernaut, just because, strength stacking and all that kind of stuff that you can do with this. So I wanted to see where it was going to go. So that's kind of where we're at and why we're here today. I do not care about the Jund mission. What I like about Exsanguinate is you fire it off and it just shoots off around the corners and through doorways and everything else. Like, it just snakes out and just annihilates everything in the path. And it does a decent amount of damage too. Let's see, I do want that Scarab. Boss fights are, I don't want to say iffy, but at this point, like this fight here, there's a chance of dying. Like, it's not the most, try to grab that before I die off in here. It's not necessarily the most comfortable build. I got a lot of life on it, and I don't know, maybe I could use some more, that actually didn't go too bad. Did not go too bad, but I got a lot of life on this, way more life than I normally have, and I honestly don't know how I got it stacked up that high. But I do have a decent chunk of life on here. We've got a lot of life regen, so in the game it says I have 1,300 life regen. I thought I had, oh yeah, I do have my chaos resistance up a little bit. So if I put this back on, I did get my chaos resistance worked out. Where this currently sits right now, I am running Righteous Fire, and we've got War Banner on here. So we've got automation on the helmet, Molten Shell, Blood Rage, and Phase Run. I took phase run out and the movement speed went down horribly. Like it got to be a crawl. It was miserable. So I put it back in. What I noticed is that my frenzy charges were actually going away, and I couldn't figure out where they were, and I had to go through and figure out where it came from. But this thing actually uses frenzy charges. So wherever it says that, consumes frenzy charges to increase duration and 100% increase skill duration per frenzy charge removed. So I kept noticing my frenzy charges were gone, and I have a lot of things that are supposed to scale damage from that. So I don't know if phase run is ultimately a good idea, but you do move a lot faster with this. And what is there? Maybe grace or something I could maybe put on. I'm not sure. This doesn't cost a lot of mana, and I am mana starved, so that's kind of why I put it in. Not sure it's the greatest idea, but the character moves horribly slow otherwise. Let's see here. On the helmet, I did switch out the implicit, so I switched out some implicits. I'm just going to show off what I have. I have increased spell damage and increased cast speed. I know I had increased attack speed at one point on something. I changed that out. On my gloves, I switched the gloves out from whatever I had to these. These have increased damage per 100 strength and increased damage per frenzy charge. I may see if I can switch that per frenzy charge off to endurance or something, because I don't have frenzy charges up all the time, being that they're taken out with phase run. So down here we've got Reap, Controlled Destruction, Cruelty, and Brutality. I did sneak in an amethyst ring, and it's got some stuff on it. It's not necessarily the greatest ring in the world, but I've really had to stack a lot of decks on this to keep things running. Somebody mentioned changing out my Carnage Heart. I actually do less damage with this. It gives me some Chaos Res and some other stuff. I know the Carnage Heart wasn't exactly perfect for it, but it had some extra strength on there. It upped my damage a little bit. This does less damage, and I have to actually work a little bit harder to get my decks in here, because this only has a little bit of strength or a little bit of dex and int and some extra int in, I had to add some dex to it. I am really dex starved on here. Let's see. I don't think I changed. Well, there's some intelligence on that ring. I don't believe I changed anything on my chest piece. We're still running Exsanguinate, Brutality, Cruelty, Chain Support, Controlled Destruction, and Unleash. I'm considering trying to do a witch version of this, because up on the witch side of the passive tree, there's something about the seals, and she can do a lot of spell damage, a lot of increased spell damage. I'm curious to see how that goes. I don't know that it's going to be better or worse. I don't really know that much about that side defensively over with like Energy Shield and stuff like that. I've more focused on Righteous Fire and Bone Shatter and things like that on this side of the tree, so I don't know how much that's different, but I've considered going up into that direction. On the boots, we've got increased damage per endurance charge, increased life regen. We've also got Corrupting Cry support with Call to Arms, Enduring Cry, and Ancestral Cry. So on the passive side of things, one suggestion somebody gave me was to take Unstoppable out and switch over to Unbreakable, which I was really considering doing. I ended up trying it, and it does have a lot. I took this because you can't be stunned, your action speed cannot be modified lower, movement speed can't be modified lower, and you get increased movement speed. I thought that was fairly important. I know there's a lot of survivability tied to this, but the movement speed was what I was looking at on that, and it really didn't make all that much of a difference. I took it off and I didn't really notice it that much. One other thing that in the previous video I believe I had taken Escalation, and I had also came over here to Dirty Techniques. Now, I know Dirty Techniques did not apply because of the ailment stuff. I knew that didn't apply. But you get here, you can get, what is it here? Let me see this. 10% to damage over time multiplier if you've killed recently. That's a costly one to take. 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes plus this to get there. So it really wasn't worth the effort. I also took off this frenzy charge duration because I'm losing frenzy charges with phase run, so I just yanked that out. And I put a jewel socket in here. Most of this jewel socket sucks, but it's corrupted, so I can't change it. But it has increased damage and increased global physical damage, and this ups my DPS a little bit here. Let's see here. I don't think there was too many other changes in here. But somebody came up with the suggestion of going over to Spiritual Aid for the minion damage, and I wasn't sure if this was going to apply or not, and it does. It definitely applies. with this skill, there's a lot of things that do or don't apply. Like you can't really use weapon damage to apply to it. It's all spell based, so it's kind of odd. So you can't go into here and take like increased damage with two-handed weapons or increased damage with one-handed weapons or anything like that. Like none of that works. So I wasn't sure if the minion stuff was going to count, but it does. So, and this one's kind of far away to get to, but I ended up pulling off the stuff for the war cry and this dirty techniques over here, and then came up this side, picked up spiritual aid, leveled it up a few more times to close the gap, and that's kind of where we're at. So at level 91, what I plan on doing for like level 92 is maybe +1 to endurance charges, maybe 93 goes to this jewel socket, 94 and 95 goes to this jewel socket. I've already picked up this stamina node here. We could do increased endurance charge. I don't know if I need to keep increasing the endurance charge though. I feel like they're lasting fairly long. But for the most part, I think this is kind of where I would call this a final build. If I was, like I said, if I was to take this to 95, we're at level 91, so 92, take your pick, 92 into the jewel socket, 93 into the endurance charge, 94 into this little strength node, and 95 into this basic jewel socket. And that would kind of be the build that I have. I did get this jewel socket, which has increased damage over time, increased spell damage while dual wielding, and reduced effective curse. I don't know if the dual wielding is even counting for this. I just had the increased damage over time and I equipped it. So increased spell damage while dual wielding. So I would assume it counts. I guess I need to go into POB and like delete that line and see if it actually changes it. Some of the stuff's a little bit weird to try to figure out if it does apply or doesn't apply. I believe this does because I am dual wielding, but some things do count and some things don't, and certain weapon-based things don't count, and it's kind of difficult to figure that out. But that is where this build is at. As far as DPS goes, on the tooltip, it says I'm doing 45,610. We are deals 32,468. Now that is without Righteous Fire. So that is 32,468. If I kick Righteous Fire on, it's like 42,585. So you get a 10,000 physical damage per second boost just by having Righteous Fire. That's a massive jump. I was very pleased to remember that. I'm glad I started looking at Righteous Fire again because it reminded me of this, and that adds a ton of damage. Now, one thing I kind of considered about, and you'll see that I got this added fire damage. So I thought about coming in here and taking Brutality out because Brutality prevents you from doing elemental damage. So this actually goes 50, let's say it goes up to 50,000 damage. This is now down to 35,000. So it drops a ton of damage. It's one thing what I was considering is because of Righteous Fire and all the fire damage and everything you've got, there are nodes in here. Well, there's like increased spell damage over here for Light of Divinity. There's increased elemental damage. I'd be kind of curious if I took the elemental route and, there's some extra life on here. Instead of doing minion damage, maybe come up into this and pick this stuff up. I don't know. It's kind of something to, POB warrior out or something like that. Plus you get 30 life and big increase to life here. Like, you could probably bend this down to here. I don't know. It's just kind of a thought that I had. I don't know how much that would apply or matter. It's probably not worth pursuing, but it was just a thought that came up, and I'm tinkering around with it a little bit. I don't really want to regret orb a whole bunch of stuff off. Like I said, we've got the big announcement tomorrow for the next league, so we're going to be figuring out what league prep is going to be, and if they're making drastic changes, I may have to make some drastic changes to my plans. Basically, I plan on doing Bone Shatter for the most part. Maybe that Caustic Arrow build that I've got, I could see myself using this potentially just to get through the early mapping or something. I don't know, maybe. Probably just work on Bone Shatter and try to get that built up. But anyway, that is going to do it for this video. We will be back tomorrow with a video for whatever they release and reaction to that. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.